I have been very blessed to have a number of words that my mother taught me at her knees. The most important being, "But for the grace of God, go I." My name is Lynn Seward. I'm 64 years old and just beginning to explore my creativity. And I started out with a camera, a cheap camera, and I've always been lured to street life. I've never been able to walk past homeless people and not feel a tug. So I began meeting face-to-face with homeless people in downtown Toronto with my camera and with my heart. I just was so filled with compassion and a deep desire to really make these invisible people, my brothers and my sisters, visible to my brothers and sisters. This man's name is Bear. He's an Indigenous man. I found him sitting on the stairs of Holy Trinity Church, and I just sauntered up beside him and sat down and said, "Hey, do you feel like talking?" And he just dove right into the center of his story. Bear grew up in a very abusive home with parents who were victims of residential school. His father abused and abused and abused every member of the family, but most especially Bear's mother. And before we parted, he said, "Can I give you a hug?" And he wasn't the first or the only person to have asked for a hug. And I fully embraced him and felt like, I don't know, I can't describe how it felt to get to know someone this way and to make him come alive to other people. How do you sleep comfortably on the streets? I took photos of people who look like angels sleeping on the streets. I took photos of people who look like they had been crucified sleeping on the streets. And yet they slept on the streets, and many of the people I spoke to who were not asleep said it was safer to sleep on the street than in any given shelter, and it's safer to sleep during the day. So that's why I saw so many. But the innocence and then the stark contrast of just raw humanity tore at my soul, and continues to. I call Rowena my street princess. She's a young girl addicted to crack and opiates. She has an older man who pimps her out, and all she gets in return is her drugs. She doesn't get a home, she doesn't get a room, she gets nothing. I asked her one day, why do I meet up with her frequently? She seems to be wherever I go, and she is so precious to me. And I said, Rowena, you're always in a beautiful dress. Why do you wear dresses? She said, it's easier to turn a trick. And all of our encounters end with the warmest embraces I've ever experienced. On my many excursions on the pavements of downtown Toronto, I always felt there was a witness beside me, a witness who was watching and also protecting and informing me of my next step. I did not know who that witness was until I had a conversation with my brother on my dad's back death, and we were reminiscing about our mother's influence on us. And I burst into tears and said, Mom was walking with me. Mom was there holding my hand when I was scared. My mom was there. As were her many teachings that both my brother and I learned at her knees. I met Chris, who is a young homeless man. I see him sitting quietly on the streets outside of Osgoode Hall, and we've developed a friendship. I stopped by, he asked me after the first time we met if I would come and visit him once in a while because he had no friends. And I said, I would be delighted to be your friend and honored. So I go back often. Sometimes he has a lot to tell me. Sometimes he says, Lynn, I'm just too depressed to even breathe. I spend a lot of time at Diversity Gardens behind City Hall. It's my go-to place because I live in the heart of downtown. And I always see this silent man sitting in a chair, just like he was some sort of Buddha or just an all-knowing man. And it took me many trips there to go over and speak to him because I didn't know what he was all about. And I went over and I just said, you look so very comfortable. And he said, I am. As I walked along Yonge Street one afternoon, I came upon two very different men. An older man with a beard, very gray, wearing a patch over one eye, in a wheelchair, with a young man, eyes so piercing that I could not look away. I asked, why are you together? And they said, we take care of each other. The young man pushes the older man through the streets of Toronto in a wheelchair as they escape from a horrible boarding house that they live in by night. The young man, his voice is the older man because he's autistic and has no words. The two are married together on their journey. I came across lots of different signs, like, is life still worth living? No empathy equals ignorance. A huge eyeball painted on a mailbox that made me think of eyes wide open as you walk the streets. How am I to get to heaven? So these signs informed my walk, the good life. So present in downtown Toronto. Huge billboards with beautiful people. Beautiful people walking down the street, laden with shopping bags from designer stores, so beautifully turned out as they walk through their life, never even glancing at those on the sidewalk. That green bag costs $5,000. It could support a homeless person, pick somebody up from the depths and rise them up to a place where they could re-enter society. But I wonder if any of these people with money to buy fancy clothes and live in fancy condos, do they even give a care about those that they ignore? So many homes scattered along the sidewalks, sleeping bags, cardboard, plastic, suitcases, untended to. No one's living there at the moment. But I talked to others around these homes, and they said to me they were keeping 6 on the other person's belongings. And keeping 6 means you're taking care of and watching out for the other person's belongings. And sometimes I really want to bring someone to my home so that they can bask in the beauty and the warmth. But I do not dare. I did before at one time. I have spoken with many bearded men along the way. I think they are hiding. the ravages of their face, the lines, the scars maybe. Some responses were very similar, such as, I made my own mistakes, and that's why I'm here. Nobody put me here, I did. Very emphatic about that. And my last bearded man became, so special to me. I met him at Diversity Gardens, and one afternoon I went there and I noticed a man was picking up litter, putting it in the garbage, arranging chairs in sort of conversational patterns. And I said to him, are you the caretaker here? He said, no, I'm just Joe Dirt. I said, Joe Dirt? He says, yeah, I live on the street. And I said, oh, that's quite remarkable that you're doing this. He says, this is my home during the day. At night I have a secret place that I sleep, but here is where I spend my days. And that short encounter led to 3 hours of exchanging stories back and forth. We laughed, we cried, we laughed, we cried some more. He had a silver tongue. If he had not been a homeless man, I would have brought him home with me, to be with me. He was a man I could fall in love with. One morning as I looked out the window onto Yonge Street near Wellesley, I was watching a woman in a doorway set up her home. And she went about it so methodically, and she was hanging things on, well, I couldn't see the hooks, but she was hanging them up on maybe rough cement or whatever, and she just had this circle around her. Well, I couldn't help myself. I didn't start my workout. I grabbed my camera and ran across the street, so eager to meet her. And I call her Dignified Deborah. She had set up a sacred space. It was so sacred that she had a line drawn that could not be crossed. I listened carefully. I didn't ask much. She just slowly revealed herself. And then I said, Deborah, would you mind if I took a photo? And she said, well, only if I can cover my dirty feet. She said, I was just getting ready to give myself a pedicure. And I said, well, sure, you've got that blanket there, cover up your feet. And so she did. And we embraced before I left. She stepped out of her circle into mine, and we embraced. And as I was leaving the gym an hour or so later, I saw her painting her toenails. When I went back to the gym next day, I was eagerly anticipating another conversation with Deborah. And to my great dismay, I could see that her home had been dismantled. She had likely been evicted by police, and metal bars were put up to keep her from going back. But what she brings to mind about my own journey is 2 endings to 2 abusive relationships that I was in. My parents took me into the safety of their home, where I began to rebuild my life so I could be the best grandmother ever. Not only did my mother's spirit walk with me, she walked with me my whole life and guided me to a life of passion and compassion. She herself was able to battle through, punch through so many episodes of extreme mental illness and the ravages of alcoholism. And yet, because my dad was such a dutiful and unrelenting in his care for my mom, she always had a place to live. If not for him, she would have been what we referred to then as a bag lady. We can put Band-Aids on the people, but they're only Band-Aids. We need so much more action. So as a result of learning that, really absorbing it, I know that my next part of my journey is towards activism. I've heard the call, I'm going to answer. And I urge anyone who is listening to me today to respond in a personal manner and also a political manner to the homeless on our streets.